Hey guys, it's Jasmine, and in today's video, we are going to talk about the time that my cat puppy's liver enzymes were unexpectedly super elevated at around 3 and 400 units, and how I managed to lower them in 9 or 10 days back to his normal baseline. Before we get started, real quick, let's pick our cat tarot card of the day. This is going to be a lengthy video, so I'm just going to quickly do some shuffling. You can think of a question you may have in mind, or you just may apply whatever card we choose to maybe what's going on with your feline fur baby or to the day in general. So without any further ado, let's pick this top card, and that would be, the Hermit in reverse. Oh my gosh, I have a picture of Puppy that looks just like that. Here we go. I have opened the explanation right here, and I will hold this card up. Let me hold it right side up so you guys can see how cute it is. As I read what this tells us, indoor kitties needn't be any less worldly than wild ones. So upright, if you don't want to do the reverse thing, much wisdom can be gained simply by watching from the window, or even hiding in a shopping bag while the rest of the world goes about its business. The Eye of Horus suggests protection and healing. Here is a safe space to turn your gaze inward. Soul searching may lead you to a new realization or past selves. So since we did get it in reverse, I'm going to go ahead and read this interpretation, which is, the Hermit card reminds us not to be scaredy cats. The world needs your wisdom. Come out of your cave and share it. I must say that is relevant to me for this video because it has taken me quite a while to actually film this and put it out to you guys. And may I remind you, while we're talking about it, that I am not a veterinarian. I'm not a vet tech. I am not a medical professional of any kind in the veterinary field. I am, however, an obsessive independent researcher who does happen to know a lot about health, wellness, and nutrition for humans, since that is my day job. And I'm also the proud mama to 2 feline fur babies, plus I guess you can say 2 feral foster fails. I guess it's safe to say at this point, since they've been living here for over 6 months now. And so I apply my research and belief in doing the best that I can to provide for these feline fur babies, since I am responsible for them and I love them all so very much. And in turn, I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to share the things that I've learned and the research that I've done and anything I've applied to my own feline fur babies in order to help you provide your feline fur baby with the healthiest and happiest and longest life that you can as well. So yeah, disclaimer, I'm not a vet, and anything I share today is simply for educational purposes. It is me sharing my story and my experience and not in any way suggesting any medical advice. All right, so I'm going to break this video down in a few parts. We're going to start off with talking about how I found out that my cat Puppy's liver enzymes were elevated. Then we're going to get into what his blood work actually showed and a description of these liver enzyme values and their roles within the body. I'll then share with you the protocol that I put into practice and what I did exactly in order to lower those elevated liver enzymes by hundreds of units in just about 10 days. I'll then explain what these things are or how these supplements work, where I got them from, and if Puppy is still using any of them. And then I'll conclude it with what I believe caused this in Puppy in the first place, as well as perhaps some suggestions if you think your cat may be in the same boat. All right, so if you're new here, my cats have been incredibly healthy. They've been eating a homemade raw cat food diet for years. Puppy is my OG. He's my first adopted, rescued boy, and I've had him for, I think, going on 6 years now. And his health has always been great. If anything, he was always very allergen sensitive, so he's allergic to fleas and has sensitive skin, and I'll talk about that in a separate video. That does come into play in this one a little bit. But earlier this year, it was a very active year, or I should say last year, 2020, there was a situation where Puppy needed to get this completely unexpected emergency eye surgery. This was back at the end of June 2020, And long story short, and if you want to see it, I've never made a video about exactly what happened and his diagnosis, what it means, and all of that. So if you'd like to see that video, please let me know in the comments, because then I'll make sure to add it to the list. But he had what is called a corneal sequestrum. In his case, it was caused by entropion, which his lower eyelid was kind of flipped invertedly so that his eyelashes were rubbing against his cornea. And this could have gradually happened. This could have happened maybe within the couple of months before this emergency situation. I do believe it was more gradual. In retrospect, thinking back, he always kind of had this tendency to itch this eye a little bit more. I thought it was conjunctivitis for the longest time. So he had to get emergency surgery for this. And before your pet gets surgery, they have to get a pre-anesthetic blood work panel done. And this all happened very quickly. This was all within a couple of hours from when I took him in to getting the blood work and speaking to the doctor and everything. So when those results came back from that blood work, it was already curbside service. I couldn't go in with him. They would call me from in the office, sitting out in the car. I don't know, you guys, that's the worst when you cannot go in with your animal. But I digress. So they called me with his results, and they mentioned that everything looked fine except for his liver values and things that were very notable when it came to liver health of your cat. In his case, those two markers were ALT and AST. Now, the normal range for ALT is considered to be 20 to 100 units, and puppies were at 312. And for the AST, the normal range is considered to be 12 to 43 units, and puppies were at 400. Right away, my first thought was, is this something to do with what's going on with his eye specifically? Because that seemed to have made sense. But very quickly, since I vocalized that right away on the phone when they told me and asked that question, they said, no, typically not. What's going on with his eye would not be causing these kinds of elevated values in these markers. So needless to say, I was not only confused because he is on this healthy diet. He's always been a very healthy boy. I was also scared because he was about to go into the surgery. He's never had a surgery before. I was a hot mess. I think I called like 2 people bawling, waiting in my car because he was getting his surgery right then. So I kind of had to hang out and wait for at least a couple of hours. And right away during that time, I wrote down what they told me. I had them email me the actual lab results so that I can have it. And even though I didn't know the definite cause yet, and neither did they, the only thing that they could suggest was that it doesn't have to do with his eye. And they suggested that I follow up with Puppy's own vet, since this was a veterinary ophthalmologist, because he was getting eye surgery done. So right away, I called my vet. I made that appointment, which they suggested be at least a week after the surgery, since Puppy still would have a follow-up from this surgery at the specialist within that week. And then we can wait another few days so he's just not overstressed and shuttled all over the place. So I made that appointment with my regular vet, already planning to get a follow-up of a full panel of blood work done and the liver panel, and that would be 10 days later. So let me give you a breakdown of what these liver values mean and what these markers show and the role that they have in the body. ALT stands for alanine aminotransferase. This is an enzyme that can be found in the liver, kidneys, muscle, but it's considered to be liver specific in cats and even dogs, rabbits, and primates. This marker being elevated is specific to damaged or injured cells within the liver. An occasional increase in these enzymes can occur with short-term infection or illness, but sustained increases in these numbers signifies more likely an underlying disease and likelihood of more serious liver damage. AST stands for aspartate aminotransferase. When this is elevated, it's a marker indicative of tissue damage that could be from other areas or organs in the body. This can include skeletal muscles, it can include the brain, pancreas, kidneys, liver, it can include the heart. So while the markers of elevated ALT show something more liver specific when it comes to damaged cells, AST is an enzyme that's released into the bloodstream due to the damage from these other tissues, which could be from various parts of the body. And keep everything kind of in mind that I'm bringing up or talking about in this video, because it'll also help you put things together at the end when I tell you how I concluded what likely caused all of this to happen. Now, right away, when I started looking things up about the AST, the ALT, what could be causing it, different enzymes, different lifestyle factors, different things that seemed that they could correlate with what was going on with Puppy, so many different potential diagnoses came up. This is probably why you always hear you should not Google doctor anything. Thankfully, I kept things rational and logical, but just some of the things that you can find when you look up why these numbers are elevated can range from nutritional deficiencies like zinc or copper. It could be due to a liver tumor. It could be due to hepatic ileosis. It could be neurotrophic cholangitis. It could be toxoplasmosis or hypothyroidism, which I have an entire video about in the Cat Stuff playlist. It could be FIP or feline coronavirus, which of course I saw that and I was like, I mean, if you didn't know it, it's not the same thing as human coronavirus. It's a completely different thing. But I read that and I'm like, of course, 2020. Watch, Puppy has feline coronavirus. Spoiler, thankfully, that was absolutely not the case. And even though blood work is a good primary teller of what's going on in order to further investigate, to really, really get that solid diagnosis, if needed, for what's going on, he would have had to get an x-ray or an ultrasound to assess the size or structure of his liver and see if there was any inflammation or even a possible obstruction of some kind. Or the really top accurate way to go about it is to get a biopsy, which clearly is the most invasive route, and that is if you have serious concerns about what could be going on with your cat. I will say that I was very, very confident that he did not have any serious underlying disease, that he didn't have hypothyroidism. And I knew that wasn't the diagnosis in Puppy's case, because typically if they do have that going on, then their ALP will also show as elevated in the blood work, and Puppy's came back in the low normal range. All right, so let me share what exactly I did and what I gave to Puppy in order to lower his values down to a normal level and to baseline within just 10 days by that vet appointment where we did his follow-up blood work. Now, the rest of the day after that surgery, as is typical if they get surgery, he didn't really have an appetite. He was just kind of getting back to the norm after the anesthesia and everything. And so he didn't really eat that much. But the following day, his appetite came back pretty much full force. And it was the first time that he'd eaten that way in a little bit, in at least a couple of weeks, in a little while. And keep this in mind, because even before the surgery, he was not himself for at least a couple of months. And there were a lot of factors for this. But something I did notice was that his appetite was kind of on and off, and he wasn't his usual self. He was definitely understandably stressed out due to a few things happening, and that in turn did affect his appetite as well, I'm sure, as did the discomfort that he was experiencing with what was going on with his eye. But starting that next day, this is what I did and what I gave him. With each of his meals, which is 2 meals, since he does eat his raw cat food, and he was still at that time eating the exact recipe that I share on catladyfitness.com. So in both his breakfast and dinner, his 2 meals, I would give him milk thistle, DMG, and curcumin, which is the curcuminoids that is in turmeric. And I actually kept the bottles since they ran out for everything, just because I knew I'd eventually be making this video. So let me show you exactly which I used. And all of this stuff I got off of Amazon. This isn't sponsored. I don't work with any of these brands. This is just me showing you exactly what I purchased and used for this whole situation. So when it comes to the milk thistle, that's something that I actually take myself and supplement myself. So knowing that it is the same, I mean, milk thistle, whether it is for cats or for humans or for dogs or whatever, the production and perhaps some additives that they put in a supplement may be different, but the milk thistle that we would take and that our cats would take is the same compound. That being said, take it from me, especially since it's something that has to actually be mixed in their food and it's not just a pill they would take like how I do and the capsule that it actually comes in for humans. They will possibly, and in our case, in Puppy's case, definitely have a strong aversion to eat the food if you just open the capsule and mix it in that way. Because I did try that since I already had it at home and had it on hand and wanted to start him on this protocol that I decided immediately. But when I put the human capsule and sprinkled it in his food, he just would not touch it. And that's when I'm like, you know what? Let me go ahead and try and find one that is made for cats, marketed for cats, and see if that makes a difference. Let me possibly try and find a liquid, which always works out better than a powder. And so I found that one brand that I do like, I'm a big fan of this brand, and I've gotten stuff from them before. There we go. Pet Wellbeing. This is their milk thistle. It is a liquid form. And this one was very, very easy to give to Puppy and to administer. It comes in a dropper, and with all of these, you always want to go by the dosage suggestion and the directions that the specific and particular supplement gives on their bottle. So I would put this on Puppy's food, breakfast and dinner, the 2 meals that he got each day, at the suggested dosage for his weight, which is included on this bottle. This worked out great. I think, honestly, it's because they put a little natural bacon flavor, which I haven't found in any other supplement like this or even any other liquid milk thistle for pets. However, after I bought this the first time and I went to get it again, it was sold out. And it's been sold out since I've checked since. It might be different when you're watching this video. I will link this, like I said, and everything I talk about in the description below. You know, unless maybe you can get it privately from their own website. I don't remember if I checked or not, since I am partial to just ordering everything off Amazon. Another con with this and anything from this company is it's not inexpensive. It's pretty expensive. I don't remember exactly, but I want to say that this teeny little bottle, which probably only lasted maybe a month, not even, probably a couple of weeks. I mean, I can really calculate it if you guys want me to, but this cost, I want to say between $30 and $40, maybe like $35, $38, which is a lot for milk thistle, and especially something that really doesn't last that long. But this is what I gave him during that span of time until the bottle ran out. When this ran out and I couldn't find it again, I then went ahead and found this. This was off Amazon as well. It's a powder. It's organic milk thistle. The only ingredient is organic milk thistle seed powder. It comes with a little scoop, and I would put the little scoop on his food, just 1 scoop twice a day. This was more affordable. This had great reviews. And again, the only ingredient is the organic milk thistle seed powder. Puppy took to it. He ate his food great. I also, all of this stuff put on Alfred's food for like 2 or 3 weeks just for, you know, potential benefit if he needed it, because nothing would have harmed him. This is all safe and has been shown to be safe for your cats to take, especially if you are taking the suggested dosages. But guess what? When this ran out, which took a while, this lasted forever. This probably lasted until at least a couple of months ago. I had to find another one and decided to go with this brand. This is another liquid one. This one does not have that additional natural bacon flavor. This is just straight milk thistle. It does have some other ingredients like purified water, glycerin, citric acid, potassium sorbate, which are not ideal. But this was the next best thing that I could find. It seems like it sells out quickly. This one, I actually want to say with this, I cut back to just 1 meal a day. This was months later. So this one, I cut back to just putting on 1 meal a day at the suggested amount according to Puppy's weight. Typically, these more often than not will go by your pet's weight, so make sure to read the directions carefully. And then once this ran out, it is right about the end of January 2021. So up until a month or so ago, I had this. And once this ran out, I have not included this in his food. But up until then, I was including this daily, and I kind of weaned off of it. The next thing I mentioned and what I used is this Vetri DMG. DMG is a supplement, and I'll get into explaining what these are shown to do and why I chose to give these to him in the next little segment of this video. But this I got off Amazon as well. And what I did was I gave him a half of the full dropper's worth. So a half of this full dropper I gave him in each meal. So he ended up getting a full dropper a day. I still give this to him because this lasted quite a while. I want to say this is only the second bottle I've purchased back since June and since all of this happened. And that's even considering I was putting a half a dropper's worth in Alfred's food as well once a day, again, just for poops and giggles, just to give him any benefit that this could have provided as well. But this you can get off Amazon. They seem to stay pretty well in stock. And this is another supplement I was giving him at that time. And then the third one I mentioned is curcumin. This brand I'm a huge fan of for myself, and I suggest it to clients all the time. Again, curcumin is one of those things that they do make it for pets. They do make it for dogs or cats specifically, but I did have this on hand because I keep it on hand for myself as is. I don't take it regularly. I kind of treat it like an anti-inflammatory in an ibuprofen sense. So that's how I take it. It's not a regular part of my regimen when it comes to my supplements or vitamins. However, I do have it on hand, and this is the one that I did decide to give to Puppy, and he ate it in his food just fine. The protocol and frequency that I gave it to him during that 10-day span, and also for, I would say, a month or two probably following, is I would split an entire capsule, and yes, they stay in your finger, so you have to be careful, but I would split an entire capsule, it's about this size, into his 2 meals. So he'd basically get half a capsule worth in each meal and a full capsule each day. If you feel uncomfortable doing that, you can definitely get one that is specifically meant for cats. It'll likely come with a scoop or an easier way to do it as well. And for transparency, I did also consider giving him NAC, which is N-acetylcysteine. But if you've ever had that before, if you know what it is, it smells sulfuric. It smells like rotten eggs. It was something that I did happen to have on hand myself that came in these capsules, and he would not touch the food the 2 times that I tried to put it in there. And I figured less is more. I didn't want to overdo it. I tend to lean towards what is the minimal maximum that will give the most benefit with the goal that we're trying to meet versus slamming with everything at once and being overwhelming. So that is something that I considered and that I researched, but that ultimately I decided not to make a part of this protocol. So a quick breakdown again of what I gave Puppy between his first blood test and liver panel, which showed these highly elevated enzymes, versus the second one, which I will show the results for on the screen right now. You could see that these were taken on July 10th. So really, it was around 9 days of him getting this regimen, but you could see his ALT went from 312 to 54, and his AST actually wasn't measured in this liver panel. And my vet is awesome. And he left me this long, thorough, explanatory voicemail talking about the blood work, explaining everything in it. And it's something that I wanted to share in this video, but it's somehow, I don't know if they delete themselves after so long, because again, this was almost 6 months ago, but they must, because that voicemail went missing. So things that I'm saying today are also in my best memory of stuff that he explained as well. But from what he said, everything seemed back to normal. Stuff like that just happens sometimes. And you guys probably know me by now, if you're not new here, that I want to know why. I want to know my best potential reason why, because I feel like if you know why, then you know how to prevent it in the future. And if you can't remember, or you don't know why, or it's like, well, it just happens, that isn't as functional of knowledge to me in order to keep, in this case, Puppy's best interest and best health in mind, in order to know how and why this happened, not just that it was a fluke, even though I do understand that sometimes flukes happen. But as I'll talk about at the end of this video, I'm pretty sure that I have a legitimate explanation to why this could have happened. And if you're wondering, well, what's that GGT? That looks elevated, and that wasn't in the primary blood work that he got done. I'll be getting to that too in a little bit. Now I want to just explain to you a little bit how these supplements work and what they have been shown to do. So it's not just me blindly telling you what I gave puppy and you blindly choosing to just go out and get them. It's always good to know, again, like I just said, the why and how this could possibly be helping, because the more you know. So when it comes to milk thistle, I was surprised that I didn't really find any clinical trials or studies that have to do with testing milk thistle or the silymarin, which is that active compound in the milk thistle, on cats. I've known of the benefits that it can provide to human beings and that it is safe for animals. And you guys know I like to provide the clinical trials or studies if they're pertaining to whatever it is I'm talking about, especially when it comes to this kind of nutritional subject matter. But even though I couldn't find anything in that clinical sense, there are plenty of people and people with fur babies who can vouch for their testimonies about the effectiveness and the benefits that they've seen or experienced. Milk thistle has been shown to support liver function and detoxification, inhibit liver cell damage, protect DNA damage, stimulate protein production by the liver cells, decrease activity of tumor promoters, and provide an anti-inflammatory benefit throughout the body. This is all due to the compound within it called silymarin, which is a word you might even see it promoted or sold as. And it's just important when you do purchase milk thistle to make sure that it says it's at least 80% silymarin. You should see that in the nutritional fact somewhere, usually in parentheses. And in order to make sure that it is absorbed properly and that it's bioavailable in order to gain the benefit, you want to make sure that it is ingested with some kind of lipid or fat. In our case, that was not an issue because there is a significant amount of fat in the raw cat food between the meat itself, the skins, the egg yolks, and the fish oil. The supplement DMG stands for dimethylglycine. Now, DMG has had some clinical trials and studies which has shown a measurable anti-inflammatory benefit in not only cats, but also dogs who do happen to struggle with inflammatory diseases like IBS, IBD. It can even include things like allergies, arthritis, or any inflammatory stresses within the body. I will say that I found one study in particular. It's not surprising, but it does show that if your cat or dog is already healthy and basically if their body isn't in need of this DMG, then they won't really reap any benefits, but it's also not doing any harm either. DMG is actually an adaptogen that helps to neutralize and combat any excessive stressors that are happening within the body. It helps to promote better circulation. It helps to utilize oxygen more efficiently within the system and has been shown to promote that overall balance if there is an imbalance within your pet's body. Now, surprisingly, when it comes to curcumin, which is in turmeric, I didn't find very many relevant studies, at least when it comes to curcumin in cats. Most of the studies have been done on humans and even quite a few on rats, but they all show that curcumin provides a reduction in oxidative damage. It supports a healthy inflammatory response within the body. It supports a healthy immune response. And unlike a lot of other compounds in this anti-inflammatory category, it can actually cross the blood-brain barrier, meaning that the brain gets some solid benefits as well. If you weren't aware, it is important to mention that supplements within this category of anti-inflammatories like curcumin or turmeric, they do act as blood thinners. So you want to keep that in mind before any procedures, whether it's yourself or your cat, before any kind of surgeries or procedures. Usually you want to cut back or stop taking it for a few days beforehand. And this is also why you definitely want to take heed of whatever the suggested dosage is on the supplement you're choosing to take, because you wouldn't want to take too much. Like I said, personally, I don't take it as a regular part of my supplemental routine. I treat it kind of like ibuprofen, kind of like something to take, whether there's aches or pains in joints or something relevant to inflammation within the body. And because our little fur babies are so much smaller, these little love bomb mass sentient beings, you really want to be careful with that dosage factor. It's also important to note with the curcumin that bioavailability is poor on its own. So the absorption is poor unless you take it with black pepper extract, which is typically in the higher quality supplements. You'll see it as piperine or bioperine. That's basically the patented black pepper extract. Or you can also take it with a lipid or fat, which again wasn't an issue for in Puppy's case because I would mix it in with his food. So why do I think that my otherwise healthy cat's liver enzymes and blood work came back with these elevated and really scary results, seemingly out of nowhere? Short answer, overwhelming stress. Just like with humans, our cats' bodies are affected very similarly when it comes to being very, very stressed. And one of the things that happens is your immune system is one of the first things to weaken and get shot. During this time last year, there was a lot going on that really could have affected Puppy. About, I want to say a month or two, maybe a month and a half or so, around that range before June 29th, before this all happened, is when Backyard Betty brought me her 3 kittens, which started a whirlwind of overwhelm for me and for the household. Because one, the kittens and Betty claimed the back catio, which there's a little kitty door. Puppy would spend most of his days out there, especially that time of year because it was nice and warm out. And so he no longer had access to that back catio. The door was shut. His routine was completely thrown off. So that in itself was kind of like a habitat stressor or an environmental stressor. Cats are very intuitive little creatures. He likely sensed the stress and overwhelm that I was feeling and couldn't even recognize, but was likely very apparent to the animals because even though I was managing it, I was definitely overwhelmed and I was definitely manifesting the stress in myself. I got pretty sick in a similar rundown sense with my immune system, which never happens to me. Our routine was completely thrown off. I was spending a lot of time out there tending to the kittens, caring for them. When it came time to kind of introducing them to Puppy, he was already stressed out. It was unfamiliar to him. I don't know if he'd ever seen a kitten before. He didn't act out necessarily, but he did just seem miserable. He's usually a lovey, chill, amazing cat, and he just seemed miserable. He just seemed depressed, unhappy. I wouldn't be surprised because he is so attached to me if it was kind of like an ownership or feeling territorial of me and me having split my time with these other feline fur babies that were complete strangers. In addition to that, after being introduced to the kittens, even though I thought that I had this whole flea situation with them since they did come from the outside resolved and taken care of through flea baths and things, some clearly did get inside. And Puppy is highly, highly allergic to fleas. He's a very skin allergen sensitive cat, like I've mentioned plenty of times. So he was having this physical stressor and discomfort because he ended up itching all over the place. And even just 1 or 2 bites, when a cat is allergic to fleas in that way, the flea saliva causes a severe reaction. So basically, Puppy went from having his smooth sailing, bougie life, routine schedule with his brother Alfred and myself, and having free range of the house, especially his favorite area that time of year, which was the catio, to having the environmental stressors of a complete change and no access, the social stressors with the new kitties, the physical stressors of even just a couple of fleas on his body, combined with the corneal sequestrum of his eye, which was slowly getting worse and accumulating over time to where his eyelashes were rubbing against it. And then what ultimately happened, and this was right before I took him to this emergency veterinary ophthalmologist, is that due to the scratching or the rubbing, he ended up giving himself a gouge in his eye to actually tear the cornea himself, to where I thought he might have to have one of his eyes taken out. He wasn't playing with Alfred. He wasn't as active or playful or sprinty or even lovey or looking for attention as he always had been. And even though I did notice, because as I tell you guys all the time, it's so important to maintain that baseline of your cat's behavior and their temperament, to monitor their health in that way. But before everything happened with his eye, I really held it on account of simply the kittens and the fact that he couldn't get out into the catio. Even knowing how much stress affects any sentient being, whether it's a human or a cat or a dog, and how absorbent we are to have this stress affect our health and our body and our immune system, sometimes you really don't recognize how bad it is until something like this happens, which is sort of a blessing in disguise. So even though the vet did confirm and say, all looks good now, his blood levels are back in check, he seems fine when it came to his blood work and things, and then when it came to his temperament and everything too, he did get back to normal very, very quickly. What I ultimately have speculated, but truly think makes the most sense to what went wrong, is that he was just so overwhelmed with so many different stressors from so many different avenues that it took a toll on his immune system, and everything just started snowballing to be worse and worse. And because he does eat raw cat food, I do take into consideration, is there something wrong with this batch? Perhaps something isn't as fresh as it should be. But in this case, I can gauge by Alfred, who eats the same exact food, and I was also beginning to give the kittens and Betty the same exact food, and all of them would eat it no problem. So that's always a good gauge as well. If you have multiple cats, when it comes to the raw cat food, if one of them is eating it just fine and the other one seems to not so much or have an aversion, then you might want to pay more attention to that actual cat and other factors versus the quality of the food. But if we're talking actual diagnoses, when it comes to the liver values and what I found with Puppy, if he was to be diagnosed with anything, even though the vet didn't do it himself, he said it was one of those, this just happens sometimes things, which I totally understand. They're not going to put their effort into digging deeper when everything does seem fine. But there is something called lymphocytic cholangitis, and that is a non-infectious inflammatory liver disease, which doesn't have to be anything permanent, but it is said to be likely caused due to an abnormality in the cat's immune system, which would make absolute sense. Not only that, but I do think if they dug deeper and had to diagnose him with anything else, then they probably would have said he had a mild case of hepatic lipidosis, which is something that I've mentioned in the video about how to help your cat lose weight in the past. This basically happens when a cat stops eating or suddenly stops eating much, much less, which causes a sudden abrupt change in their metabolism. And this can cause a severe dysfunction in their liver and an accumulation of too much fat. And this is why you never want to put your cats on super strict diets. I talk more about this in that video. You can check it out in the cat stuff playlist, but you really want to promote weight loss very, very slowly in order to avoid this hepatic lipidosis from happening, because it can show in markers like these liver values. And fortunately, if you didn't know, the liver is the one organ that can regenerate itself successfully, considering it's not in a severe, failure state. But the best thing to do is to prevent anything from potentially happening anyway. So in Puppy's case, because his discomfort, his stress, his misery at the time was causing him to not even want to eat, which, imagine having a gash in your eyeball and everything he had going on. As much of a food-driven boy as he is, it's no surprise that his appetite took a shot with his immune system. All a diagnosis is a group of symptoms with a name put on it. So I would say that would be a name that I would put on his group of symptoms, as well as the markers that the liver profile showed. But I also say this because in hepatic lipidosis, on the blood panel, the GGT, which wasn't taken in the initial blood work, but it was taken in that follow-up vet blood work, that showed to be on the higher end, so very, very slightly elevated. And that's a marker that will show in cases of hepatic lipidosis. So those are, everything that I came up with and what makes sense to me to what went wrong, what happened. There were clearly a lot of causes. The corneal sequestrum, I think, was like the key player, but there were so many different factors. And the truth is, I can speculate all day long to what was the strongest factor, what really, really caused it. But what matters is he's good now. He has been thriving ever since then and getting better and better. There was a period during that seasonal allergy time a couple of months ago where I noticed him getting itchy again, and I kind of tweaked and worked on his diet. I switched some things up in the raw cat food, and I've been telling you guys about that, kind of teasing it, but I wanted to make sure he ate this way for at least 2 or 3 months before I shared anything, just to ensure that he really is doing amazingly, which he is. It's like a revived cat from even just a year ago. He's playing again. He's playing with Ronan the kitten and Betty. He's happy. I'm surprised he hasn't jumped on my desk in the span of this video. You would think he was 5 years old because he's 12 right now. So he's been 11, 12 in the span of all of this happening. And I'm really excited to share this with you guys. Oh my God, I know this video is probably so long, but I hope that you found it helpful. I hope that everything I share today not only maybe helped you gain insight on something that's possibly going on with your cat, but gave you a little glimpse into my thought process and the process that I figure things out and use what I learned from these veterinary tests and communicate with my vet, but also take responsibility myself for my feline fur baby, for his health, for the health of all of my now 4 feline fur babies. It's really important to trust your veterinary healthcare provider for your fur babies, but also to research yourself, to do your own work in the background in order to find out what could possibly be wrong. And what I prefer to do as well is what went wrong in order to prevent it in the future. All right, all that being said, if you found this video interesting or helpful, please click that thumbs up below to like this video because that helps this channel out. And it will also help this video get in front of the eyes of somebody else who may be seeking out ways to potentially lower their cat's liver values if they seem to be high, if the symptoms seemed similar or the causes seemed similar to puppies. Again, keep in mind, he is generally very, very healthy. He eats the best species appropriate diet that you can possibly feed your felines, which is the raw cat food diet. But again, I do have a video about hyperthyroidism for cats and a bunch more. So make sure to check out the cat stuff playlist if you want to seek those out or have any other questions about raw cat food specifically, because I have tons of stuff there and on catladyfitness.com. And by the way, if you're new here and feel like joining the Cat Lady Fitness family, I would love to have you. Just click that subscribe button below if you want to hear more about raw cat food, feline nutrition, things like today's video, which is probably so long, I'll make sure I put timestamps below, as well as things for humans like workouts, recipes, stress management techniques like our Tapping Tuesday videos, fragrance reviews, and honestly, whatever else I feel like posting. Remember to check the description for links about certain things I've talked about today. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll do the best I can to either point you in the right direction of a different video or answer your question right then and there. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.